Anyway.
Yegale Tame. We're on page 30.
Yeah.
Chayei Sarah. What does this have to do with anything? This is a short mimer. It's too short, in fact. But we'll try to supplement it.
The way going this morning.
Good. We'll try to supplement it with other maimarim and talk about the topic of how to eat. How to eat correctly. So Yegale Tame is part of the nigun that the Arizal, the song that the Arizal wrote for Shabbos morning. Right? He wrote one for each of the 3 meals on Shabbos. And each one, if you learn in his kavanos, so there's different intents for each one of the meals. Each one represents a different state of unification above. And the interesting thing is that the secret of eating is dafka in the second meal, not in the first one. The first one is more dedicated to the beginning of the unification. Sort of say that there's no time to really eat, or at least not to contemplate the meaning of eating. So one of the lines that we say there is Yegale lantame divitrei sar nahame de'inun at bishmei kfila uklisha. Yegale lantame divitrei sar nahame de'inun as bishmei kfila uklisha tili la 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 la. So what does that mean? He will reveal to us. The word tame can be, like in Hebrew, understood either the secrets of or the taste of. Okay? Of the 12 loaves of bread. Because according to the Rizal, you put 12 loaves of bread on the table.
So the Baal Shem Tov.
Probably. The Alter Rebbe, like many things, according to the Rizal, you do a kafos before you sit down to eat.
Oh, yeah?
You do 2 akafos, and the third one you do in your head, around the table. I imagine the Mekubalim still do this. But many of these things, they were very, I think I told you once, the Rabbi Ginsburg told us, that really all the kavanos of the Arizal are what he had one day. Those were his kavanos one day. Because if you understand the speed at which these people's minds work, everything that he taught was from one day of what he did. The next day he had other kavanos altogether, but he couldn't teach all of it. Just to teach one set of kavanos, like what he had for 1 week, one Shabbos.
Took him a lifetime.
Not a lifetime, 18 months. And that was all the time that he had with Rav Chaim Vital. But the purpose of kavanos is not to become calcified. You're not supposed to set it in stone. The whole point of a kavana is that it's the inner meaning of what you're doing, and the inner meaning changes. Of course, you have to be bar hachi, you have to be somebody who knows what they're thinking about, what their intent is. But the Arizal's mind, as we know, he said once that he was asleep for half an hour, and what he was revealed about one set of psukim in Parshas Balak, and he said in 70 or 80 years I couldn't teach it. It was too much. So in any case, those were his kavanah. So he says, will be revealed the meaning or the mysteries or the taste behind the 12 loaves of bread that we're eating, which are what? Which are the secrets. Okay? Are a letter in his name, At Bishmei, a letter in his name, meaning one letter in Yud Kei Vav Kei, in the essential 4-letter name, Kfila Uklisha. And the name itself is described here as Kfila, meaning double, and Klisha. Klisha is like Kilshon. Kilshon, you know the word Kilshon. Kilshon is what you use to turn the hay over.
Pitchfork.
It's pitchfork. So, in Hebrew, the Kilshon comes from the Aramaic Klisha. It's Kuf Lamed Yud Shin Aleph. It basically means to extend out. That's what it really means. But Klisha also means weak. Kalush. And so there's a few different etymologies for this word. It's hard to know exactly which one he meant. The Alter Rebbe is going to take it in a certain direction. Okay, so he wants to understand what this all is. How is this related to Chayei Sarah? Because kfila, that it's double, is also the meaning of Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the Machpelah cave, where Avram buried Sarah. It's called the double cave.
Right. Either one cave on top of another, or two caves side by side.
Right, and one inside the other. And I told you the story about the cave I'm going to visit on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if that's a cave side by side. So there's a.
Well, there are people who went down in the cave of Machpelah
Okay.
in '67.
Okay. Well, there's pictures from if you want to see.
Oh yeah.
I have a book with a secret book with all the pictures
Oh, yeah.
from inside. I don't know if it's so secret. Probably printed in like 500 copies. So probably not the only one.
You see the farm then?
No, they didn't. No. When they went in, they didn't want to enter into the inner cave. They went as far as the outer cave. And the outer cave had enough, all the way, there's a long tunnel underneath Ulam Yitzchak, underneath the main Zal there, the main hall. So there's a long hallway underneath. And the whole hallway is littered with what we call rekev, which is basically what's left over after bones deteriorate. So it was that in the ancient times they didn't bury in separate burials and separate graves. There's no such thing. They put the bones into jars or something after they've been cleaned by the elements, and then they'd be in a cave somewhere. But the whole thing of jars is not so clear, because after a while, jars break, and then it's made out of cheres. Cheres anishbar eventually breaks, and they get mixed up. So apparently it was a holy place to be buried in Ma'arat HaMachpelah. So a lot of people brought their jars there, or whatever it was, and the whole hallway is lined with what's left over after. I mean, they're talking about at least 2,000, 3,000 years. And then it's a long hallway. I think they said it's about 40 meters or 30 meters, something. Then it leads to a cave. And the first cave they had to open. It wasn't so simple to open it. There was a doorway that was covered with stones. Whatever they went in, and then they found a much more intact room. And there were actually stone sarcophaguses, but basically stone coffins, I guess we call it today. So, and then they saw that on the wall, it took them a while to find it, but they saw on the wall that there was another entrance that was covered, and that they didn't go into. So they didn't go into the inner chamber. But apparently, according to that, it could be that it's both. That it's one inside the other, and also one over the other. Because it could be that second entrance goes further down deep into the ground. So it could be that it's both of them. In any case, so they took pictures. The reason they couldn't do all this was because it was illegal. They went in the dead of night on some holiday when Jews had access to Ulam Yitzchak. And the Waqf was upstairs, so they couldn't make noise. So this whole thing is about the cave of the Machpelah. The connection is כנודע מעניין מערת מכפלה. הנה מילוי ה' בה' אחרת. מבחינת כפילה כנודע מעניין מערת המכפלה. So when you fill the letters, the hey, you can fill it in a number of different ways, but the filling of kingdom, of Malchus, is hey with a hey. So you write hey, hey. That's how you write it. Hey. And when you fill the hey with a hey, and the vav with a vav, that's called Shema Machpelah. It's called the name of the Machpelah. Because then the full name of Hashem filled out will be Yud Vav Daled, Hey Hey Vav Vav Hey Hey. So each letter, the filling is equal to the letter itself. So in the Yud, it's Yud is 10, Vav Daled is 10. And then the Hey 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 5 and 5, Vav Vav 6 and 6, and Hey Hey Vav 5 and 5. So that's equal together to ban, to 52. It's a very interesting thing that I only recently heard from Rabbi Ginsburg, and I've never heard this. And it's kind of scary that I never heard this from him. But somebody else who's been around for the last 10 years told me that he heard this from him, and it makes perfect sense. He said that all the gematriot are really just placeholders. They're like references. They're like quick, handy ways to say all the Torah that's behind them. So when the Arizal says ban, he says 52. So right away, somebody who knows Kabbalah, so for him, ban is a certain part of the world of Akudim that broke, a certain part of the world of Nikudim that broke. It's the pieces that went into building the world of Vodim, of Atzilus. It's Malchus. It's the and you right away you have a whole picture of what he's saying. Ban, it means all these things. And just to say quickly, shorthand, it's really a shorthand for all the meanings. You just say ban, 52. And then the person understands perfectly well everything you're talking about. So the place that you see this the best is in the fillings of God's name. That there are 72 and 63 and 45 and 52. And so asmab, as he says. So even the gematrias have a shorthand for the shorthand. Then you just say asmab. We say 232. So you say that in Kabbalah right away. A person knows you mean 72 plus 63 plus 45 plus 52. So you mean the whole Seder Atzilus. You mean the whole thing. You just say 232, Relab. And you finished. Or you just say asmab. And it's an incredible thought, because really then you begin to understand why for the Arizal mathematics in Torah is the Malchus. And he says there's the least light there. There's almost no light. Why? Because all the meaning is upstairs. All the meaning is above it. But you get this final shorthand, like the acronym of the acronym of the acronyms, all together, and it just sparks everything at once when you just say it. And that's the way you're supposed to treat Gematria. At least one way that you're supposed to treat it.
So that shows you, once again, something which I've always felt, that you can't make up your own gematrias.
Right. I told you, the Rebbe has a sikha on it, in Tetzave, volume 26, the sikhos. And he writes there that thing, that you can't make up your own gematria. And then he makes up one.
Yeah, but he didn't make it up.
Apparently not. But it's very interesting to read the Sikha. He goes into a long explanation why you can't make. But he doesn't mention any of this. That it's really shorthand. He just says it's Ruach HaKodesh. It's some kind of divine spirit. But really, when you think about it in terms of scholarship, it's like a shorthand for so many things. Right? So many things you've learned, and it's a whole structure that can be referred to and quickly by just one number.
But this Ruach HaKodesh doesn't take away from the fact that it's shorthand.
Right.
Because, sometimes you're not in a position to work out all the shorthands. So the Kodesh Baruch Hu tells you what it is.
Right.
It doesn't mean necessarily understand all of the numerology means.
But it definitely explains why there's so little light there, because it's up to you to introduce light. It's just a placeholder. It's just some kind of reference. V'anyan uvan. So it says here, which is the last hey of the ban, which is Yud Vav Dalet Hey Hey Vav Vav Hey Hey. V'anyan uvan b'agdim. So the double letter we're talking about is the Hey Hey at the end. That's the main thing. Kfila uklisha. The kfila, the one that's doubled, is the last Hey. The first Hey is also doubled, but in the reference here of Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the cave of the Machpelah, that phrase in the Torah refers to the final double Hey. So now we're getting to obviously this is connected to food, because we say this, he said, the Rizal put this together for the second Shabbos meal on Shabbos morning. So to understand it, we have to understand the inyan, the whole meaning behind food, behind eating. So the main point of eating, obviously, is because a person is sustained by it. it becomes the fat, it becomes the blood, it becomes the nutrients in the body. V'adam hu nefesh, and blood is the life force, or at least it carries the life force of the person, okay? Because it's dynamic, it's moving all the time. בחיות האדם, שמקבל הכבד אדם מן המאכל ושולח ללב ולמוח. So the blood is what's connecting everything. And in the ancient picture of digestion, okay? So the thinking was very logical. They didn't think about it as in the same way that we do. They thought about it as cooking. And you cook the food, and the body continues to cook it. So it's broken down. So what cooks in the body? Where are things cooked in the body? It's a very good question. In the liver. That's a very interesting thing. Why would you say that the liver is where things are cooked?
Because that's where all the chemical processes are taking place, and that's where there's the heat.
Okay. So it's interesting. We say today that the digestion is in the stomach.
That's
but
all
really
the enzymes.
that's just the enzymes. That's the beginning.
That's what's broken down.
It's broken down.
Well, then the pieces is delivered to the factory, which reorganizes
right.
them.
And the chemistry set is really in the liver. And pancreas, I guess, adds some stuff, and the bile adds more. How do you call it? The bile. What's it called?
Bile duct?
That's the ducts. What's it called? Where do you get the bile from? It's called kisamara.
Duodenum.
Duodenum. How do you say the kisamara?
Gallbladder.
So they all add their enzymes in there, but really it's all being cooked somewhere in the. So this theory of cooking is still around, but we call it chemistry today. We have a different picture for it. In the Zohar, it writes that the liver produces blood. It takes out the good part and transforms it into blood. And then sholech lelev, and it sends it to the heart, and so the heart gets, meaning what's good in the blood it sends to the heart, and what's even better goes up to the brain, which is pretty much what we have today, but we don't see it. I mean, no doctor would ever tell you that that's how it works, because it's not that but it's true that the parts that can't be used are stored in the liver, and then people get pyrosis and all these problems because they don't let the liver take these things out. They sort of accumulate, and then you have the whole problem with glucose today, that the liver can only, I think, 60 grams or something like that, store 60 grams of glucose, and anything beyond that just goes into the bloodstream. And so it's good for energy, but if you fill your bloodstream more and more with glucose, and so it's got to turn into something. The liver can only do 60 grams per day, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very good with handling sweets. In any case, so these are called the three controllers of the body: inun be'alma, kaveda, veliba, ve'mocha. The liver, the heart, and the brain. So he's not here. He's not getting so much into the whole theory. There are mamarim that discuss this in much greater length, and obviously this is not a medical picture. It's not a medical anatomy. This is coming to describe, like all ancient science adopted by the sages. They weren't so interested in the science behind it. What they were interested in is, what does it symbolize? If Galen says that this is how it works, that liver takes the worst part, and it gives the heart the better part, and the brain ends up with the best part. So what do you understand from that? By the way, this is a whole topic that is very confusing to everybody who studies consciousness, because they say nowhere in the ancient world before the 16th or 15th century did anybody associate consciousness with the brain. Okay. Where did people associate consciousness? With the heart. It's always the heart is conscious. The heart is thinking. But they didn't associate thinking or consciousness with the brain. But that was obviously not true, because in Galen, from the 2nd century and way before that even, there was a very clear understanding that the brain is the highest organ of the body. Now, why didn't they associate thinking there? That's a different question. Because maybe they were thinking that the brain did something even higher than just think. But it's not because they didn't realize the importance of the brain. Because you see the halachos in Chulin, you see everywhere, the knowledge that if you puncture the brain, the animal is automatically a treifa. It's automatically unfit for eating, because it's going to die. There was a very clear knowledge of what the importance of the brain was. Why they didn't write that the brain thinks is a different question in and of itself. But they were very aware of the importance of the brain. This is one of the examples. And again, like you said, the sages were not interested in the science behind it, because they knew science changes. So today it's cooking, tomorrow it'll be chemistry, and then, I don't know, 50 years we'll figure out that it's all viruses. I don't know. We'll figure something out entirely different about how this actually works. We have the basics down, but we don't really understand everything. What the sages were interested in is, what does this say about the hierarchy within man? That there is a liver, a heart, and a brain. And these three together, their initials are melech, right? Moach, lev, kaved. So they always said that if a person wants to be a king, he has to read it in that order. First the brain, then the heart, and then the liver. And the liver was the seat of the Yetzer Hara. The liver was the seat of the cravings, of all the negative things. And the brain was the seat of everything that was moral and good and so on. Maybe not called thinking, but it was like what today we associate with the heart, they associated with the brain. And through this process, food is elevated. What do you mean elevated? It becomes fit for the higher organs. The liver will take anything. The heart needs something more pristine. The brain needs the most purified essence of the food. From this food becomes eventually the brain and the heart. And it strengthens the heart and the brain. To serve God. In the heart, it turns into the fire of love of God. And without eating, there would be no fire in the heart. There would be no burning desire for godliness. And the brain is also strengthened by this food. To be able to contemplate the greatness of God. And this is what it means, that there is a process of clarification, of purification, through which the food is transformed into a human being, into the different parts of the human being. You have to go? Or we have
How much time do you have?
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
5 more minutes if you want to finish.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that eating is different during the weekdays and during Shabbos. Its purpose is different, and what you can get out of it is different. Okay?
I notice a physical change about eating on Shabbos and eating. There's a physical change in how much you want to eat, when you want to eat. Perhaps it's just how to go, but there is definitely something else there.
So, if it's something physical, so, somebody will tell you, you're imagining things.
No,
or it's just a habit.
Yeah.
It's just a habit that you built. But he doesn't want to get so much into the physical side of things. He wants to say the way you can get out of the food is completely different. That the level of contemplation, the level of divine service that you can get out of food during the weekdays is very different from what you can get out of it on Shabbos. On Shabbos is a different level entirely. That's going to be the topic here. And really, it's saying that food itself really it serves two different purposes. This purpose that we just described is just to sustain man, and it's even to sustain his divine service. But it's not yet what we're talking about. That's not the higher level. That's just the basic level. So even if you're using food to learn and to daven and to do everything you should, that's still just a weekday level. That's not the level of yegale l'antami, that he should reveal to us the mysteries or the meanings, the reasons behind things. Yeah. To understand something much higher. Aval b'Shabbat borer asur. And why is this? Because you're not allowed to purify on Shabbos. You're not allowed. How do you translate borer? Must be a good word.
Oh yeah,
it's a hard word to translate.
Sorting.
And sorting, taking what you want out of what you don't want. Which is basically what's happening here, because all the food comes into the liver, according to this theory, the Galenic theory of digestion. What is select is taken out and given to the heart, and then it's once again purified, and what is even more pure, pristine, and select goes to the brain. So that process you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. So somebody would say, but the body's doing it, I'm not doing it. It's not something I'm doing. But that's not the end of the story.
Something which you can't control.
What is it like? It's like
unless
the story.
you're going to fast.
So it's like the story of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair's donkey.
Right.
That when Shabbos came, he would not, or his cow, when Shabbos came, they wouldn't work. But they were an animal. How do they know? Because a tzaddik, his animal soul, and his animals feel what he feels. They're not completely deaf and dumb.
So you want to say that his donkey was part of his animal soul?
Again, it's a representative. The whole story itself could be allegorical. It might have happened also. But really, the purpose of telling us the story is to explain that Yodea Tzaddik Nefesh Be'emto, that the tzaddik knows his animal soul. He knows how it works. So he affects it. It won't do certain things. Where do we have this? Every person has this at some level. Like that we say that we should say thank you to our bodies. That when we come to Modim, in the Amida, we bow down without even thinking about it. Okay? We can be in the middle of the market in our thoughts. And we still bow down when we come to it, without even knowing that we're saying it. Because we're so used to it. The body gets used to these things. So even when it comes to food, there's a certain level in which this is not happening. Now, if you come with your chemistry set and you try to check the body, is it doing it or not doing it, it'll probably come up with the simple answer that of course it's doing it. It's still going through the same digestive process as it did on the weekdays. But that is not what the sages are referring to. They're not referring to the Galenic explanation in its empirical evidence, trial, and whatever, that this is what's happening chemically in the body. They're talking about what does the soul get out of this food? What is the food able to give the soul? So it says, in the weekdays, it can give the heart the fire to burn with love of God, and it can give the brain the power to contemplate God.
Okay,
but on Shabbos, it's not going to give that.
Well, the food you eat in Shabbos is intrinsically different, because when you go to the supermarket and you pick it up, you say the Kovet Shabbos Kodesh. You say the Kovet Shabbos Kodesh. So you've already dedicated it to Shabbos. So it's...
Somebody told me even that with all the health food and whatever, the guy who knows a lot told me that studies have shown that it really doesn't matter what you eat. As long as you eat normal, it doesn't matter what you eat. It matters how you treat the food. It matters how you look at it. It matters if you invest time in the cooking. Those things matter. They make the food work better for you, and not the ingredients. So the ingredients almost don't matter. So I don't know. He's a very evidence-based medicine type of guy. So he's probably basing this on very good studies. But so the whole health food is just selling nothing to. Okay. So we'll end here, and tomorrow we'll find out what's different on Shabbos.
You here on Tuesday? You going down to this cave in the middle of the
Tuesday, I'm going in the morning early. Actually, no, I think we can learn. I think they told me that I could come later because they're setting up the radar or whatever.